Good evening, Todd Sachs of Sachs Realty, and welcome to another Tuesday night podcast. And tonight, we didn't go very far for our guest. In fact, we're in Maryland, and our guest tonight is in D.C., and his name's Chris Burch. And guys, you're going to be really excited because a lot of you that are looking to get into real estate investing, you have jobs, you have other businesses, you have things to do, and that's the same thing with Chris Burch. He has a printing company. And we're going to learn tonight how he navigates owning a business and working a lot of hours and still finds time. At least he really desires to be in the real estate business. So, and he's going to tell you how he does it. Guys, I'm Todd Sachs. I'm the broker and founder of Sachs Realty. We are a Maryland real estate company, and we help buyers and sellers and tenants of both commercial and residential real estate. But we also have a broker network all over the country. So if you need an agent, you're not represented, you can hit me up. All of our information is in the show notes. And I will be glad to point you to one of our stellar agents or brokers anywhere you are. So, guys, without further ado, let's go ahead and meet Chris Burch. Chris, thanks for joining us tonight.
Certainly, Todd. It's a pleasure.
Go ahead and give everybody like a kind of high-level view. I know, you like myself didn't finish college. You could say we dropped out, but things kind of worked out okay. We're not, certainly saying, "Hey guys, don't go to college." No, but kind of give everybody like a high-level overview of you.
Well, it started actually back in high school when I really aspired to get into the entertainment industry. I started DJing. From that, it led into hosting and promoting my own events, mainly because as a DJ, you're, hired help. You get, a set fee, you entertain, you get paid, you go home. And I was watching these promoters hosting these events and promoting these events, and I'm watching all this money come through the door. Now, keep in mind, I didn't understand at the time what was the cost of doing these events, but I just saw it from the perspective of an entertainer or a customer, I would say, that you just see all this money coming through the door, and he's paying me, at most a couple $100. He has, hired assistants and help and security and whatnot. But I see 800, 900, 1,000 people in there partying. And I'm saying, wow, he's charging $10, $15 a head. That's $10,000 to $15,000. I'm getting a couple hundred. So it, in a sense, falsely put me in the perspective of how much money these entertainment promoters were making. So I jumped into the entertainment business in high school, started hosting the weekend cabaret, if you would call it, in the auditorium or the cafeteria. We'd set up a light show and set up stage, and it was great. It was fun. But going into college, I was then promoting even more events. We had a weekly Sunday party. We had a, Friday, Saturday, we would do a special concert once or twice a month. And it was not too many years after that, after almost going broke trying to do it, because you're always looking for the next big thing. You're always looking to do something bigger, and you don't necessarily always calculate the attendance, because you might think it's a great idea and you have all the bells and whistles. You're on the radio. You have this big entertainer coming in from out of town, and for whatever reason, nobody wants to see it, or you do a minimal attendance. So now you're doing the next event, trying to make up for the loss of the previous event. So that led me, by creating my own network, I knew other promoters. I knew the venue operators. I was at the time actually designing my own marketing materials for all of our events. And that kind of led me into a side business where I was then not only designing, but then started print brokering. And brokering, for those of you who don't know, is I wasn't the printer. I was the person who would design it. And then I set up a wholesale price with a vendor. And I was able to then have them print it for me. I would pick it up. My customer would never know. And then I would, tack on a couple dollars for my profit. Did that that was from 2000, about 99 or 2000 up until 2004. I was doing that, just acting as a print broker. And then I had an opportunity to take over a small retail storefront where an associate, he was locked into a lease. The business he had there it wasn't working. So I said, well, I'll take over the back half of his shop. went out and bought a color copier, went out and bought a paper cutter, and started printing my own stuff in small quantities. And that evolved into what it is now today. We've been in business since 2004. We're a commercial printer. We offer anything from signage to banners to business cards, postcards, posters, whatnot. But along the way, I dibbled and dabbled in real estate. So that kind of leads us more to our conversation today of kind of the evolution of, what I've done.
Yeah. And for me, I've been in the real estate business my entire career. So, I'm a Baltimore native. Chris lives in DC, but he likes Baltimore. He is investing in Baltimore. He's got a YouTube channel where he has a lot of videos about Baltimore. But tonight, you're not just going to learn about Baltimore or, being an entrepreneur. You're going to learn about things that are fundamentals that you can apply, with real estate investing. So whether we're talking about neighborhoods and development opportunities or, where to buy, everybody wants to know, where can I buy where I get appreciation and not lose? So we're going to talk about some of those strategies. I've been a real estate investor myself for 25 plus years. Kind of unique. I just became a contractor straight out of high school, went to college, kind of dropped out, early, semester and a half into it. So that's pretty early. But the real reason that I dropped out, and guys, like I said, I'm not trying to say you should drop out of college, but the real reason for me that I dropped out was because I had to make money early on. I was taking care of my grandmother and who was, was ill. And, was heading to the Marine Corps, actually, was my path, my desired path. And my grandmother became sick and I never went. I stayed home and I just started hustling. I knew I had to make money. I knew I had to take on an adult role earlier than, a lot of people do. So I started out, sort of hustling and getting into business early on. When I was in college, I just felt like, by that point, I'd already started my construction company and landscaping business. And I was really just, I had employees in the field and people were trying to beep me with a beeper, which is how we communicated early on when we didn't have cell phones. And then you would get that little box and you'd run to the payphone. If it was important, right? We put in codes like 911, if you needed to respond quickly. But anyway, so I started out in the construction business very early on and started building houses, rehabbing houses, developing land, subdividing, did some commercial development, some commercial condominium development, and now I'm a landlord and investor still. So we're going to try and focus on some of those questions too that both of us can kind of satisfy tonight. So we appreciate you guys listening. If you haven't already done so, Chris and Sachs Realty, we both have YouTube pages. So if you're watching this on another platform, YouTube is really a great place to follow us. If you would subscribe to both our channels and hit those alert bells, you get more content like this if you're interested in real estate. So anyway, Chris, so what turned it on for you, man, back, when you started investing? What was your interest, in real estate? Why real estate?
It started probably in college. I was renting with 2 or 3 other roommates. We were renting a house. As you said, I was kind of halfway going to college for the first semester and a half. I wasn't interested, and I can admit it now. I'm the only person of, my generation in my immediate family that never graduated, and it doesn't bother me at all. It just for me, school just wasn't it. I remember my second year. So I did my full first 2 semesters. The spring of my second year, my father just had a genuine conversation with me. And he said, look, I really want you to do what you want to do. If you're not going to go to class, if you're not going to do it, stop wasting the money. Go do what you want to do. Understand, Mom and I are here for you, but we want you to do what you want to do. And I took that, to the heart and was like, wow, it's a true statement. Your parents believe in you. Just do what you want to do. Stop wasting your time. Go out there and just do it. And it was a rocky road, man. I got to admit, it was a rocky road. There was a lot of sleeping on your friend's couch and, renting a brother's bed, or my brother owned another house, renting a bedroom at his house, and just kind of learning how to manage and pivot as you go. But the initial thing for me with real estate is, in college, we were renting a house just off of campus. I think it was $300 a piece. There were 4 of us in the house. It was myself and 3 roommates. And I'm thinking $1,200. Okay. And at that time, the internet was almost there. This was mid 90s, 95. So the internet was almost there. AOL dial-up, I think came out in like 98 or something like that. But I was able to do basic research at the land records in Norfolk. And I was curious, and I went down and I pulled the land records, and I saw that there was a mortgage on this property for like $48,000, 30-year mortgage. And I just did the math. I'm like, this guy is rolling in cash. He's got a $48,000 mortgage over 30 years, and we're rolling in $1,200 a month in positive cash flow for him every single month. And I think that was the first time it really hit me. But the funny thing is, it took a while for me to really grasp it, understanding real estate, because although I was never taught real estate, I always heard that, you go find a real estate agent. They help you qualify with a lender for a mortgage. You then see what you're, able, quote unquote, able to afford, whether you're pre-approved or pre-qualified, and then you go shopping. Well, for me, that's really hard because I've never been an employee. I've never had a W-2. I've never barely even had a 1099 to prove my income. It was just like, it was what it was. So I was not traditional. I would never, at that time, never qualify for a mortgage. So I became a renter, and it didn't bother me. I had this, I don't know what it was. It was in, the back of your mind. You're like, well, I don't qualify. Let me just keep moving. And I didn't worry about it until 2014. So about 6 years ago, I was just fed up with it, only because I had a really nice fancy condominium in a brand new neighborhood in DC along the waterfront. And I got in at a prorated rate because if you remember in 2000, what was it? When the market crashed 2008. So 2009, it was a prorated. So I had a 3% increase. And then I started doing the math of, holy cow, 3% increase year after year. I'm paying the equivalent of a $600,000 mortgage, yet I don't qualify for the $600,000 mortgage. And that led me more into, how are other people doing real estate if they're not qualifying for mortgages? Like, there has to be another way, right? And that led me into the world of YouTube University and meeting people and talking to people and realizing there's so many different ways to do real estate. You don't have to just be the traditional, W-2 9-to-5 worker that qualifies for a 30-year fixed. Right?
Yeah, that's so true. I mean, I can remember, when you're self-employed, it's not easy. I mean, here's the crazy thing. I mean, traditional banking, they want you to fit into this box.
Yep.
They want you to be in this exact box. And so what happens is, if you're self-employed, they look at you a lot different, right? Now, all of a sudden, they're like, well, you could not do well. Well, guess what? You could get fired from your W-2 job too. So, I mean, you can lose your job just as easy. But I think through the years, it has gotten a little bit easier. But Chris, you touched on something that's really vital to real estate investing, and that is financing, period, because it doesn't matter whether you have a job or whether you're self-employed. If you're going to go about it traditionally in financing your growth and your projects, you're going to be capped and hit a wall of where you can go or where a bank is going to lend you money. I mean, there's different things like, they have, individual borrower limits. So if you're dealing with a local bank, they may only let a borrower borrow $3 million is their cap on, before they have to start collaborating with other lenders, and then their the requirements change drastically. So you touched on, I mean, that's a great point. So you were renting.
Yep.
And and otherwise didn't qualify, but you knew through watching YouTube videos and other things, you knew there were other ways to get the money.
Yeah.
And that's what you did. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So talk a little bit about what you have done in your real estate investing. So you realized this landlord was making a ton of money on, his return by charging you rents. You started saying, hey, wait a minute, if he can do it, I can do it.
Yeah.
Kind of walk us down the journey. What types of investing have you done?
Okay. To start out, the first deal was a major flip. It was in Prince George's County, Maryland, in the town of District Heights. I had not actually contracted, but I had a neighbor who was a local agent, lived around the corner from me. He and I were at some social event back when we used to have those. We were talking one day and he just said, oh, you're interested in, investing. I'd love to set up basically a multiple listing service search for you. Give me some of the criteria, the area, the price point. So he set up a basic MLS search that I get an email every morning. I still get them every day of properties under $150,000, single family, no condos, no HOAs is a big thing if you're going to potentially do a flip, because that will be a factor to your buyer, your end buyer. So the first one was a completely dilapidated property. The roof was literally like this, and we went and looked at it, and it was a foreclosure, and it was being handled by the trustee, who was also the listing agent. He was the foreclosure attorney who also listed the property. I had seen that it was on market about almost 4 months. It had gone under contract and then got relisted. So something went awry with the original buyer. We went and looked at the property. It was a complete shell. I have a very good friend of mine who's a general contractor in DC, Maryland, and Northern Virginia. We set up a second appointment just to look at the property so he could kind of give me a little bit better of a scope of what type of work was really going to be needed. Obviously, there was structural issues with the roof the way it was. Someone had gone in there and gutted the house. You could tell either the previous owner, I think later on we learned that the person who was being foreclosed on had an idea to renovate the house and likely, I don't know, ran out of money. I'm not sure. So anyways, we went to settlement. We bought the house for $105,000, which is a extremely good price for PG County, Maryland. We originally thought the scope of work was going to be around $70,000. We got into the project about 45 days or so. We took the roof off, and that first 45 days was mostly getting permits and stuff approved. At that time, it probably is still a little bit today, is Maryland is a little slow when it comes to permitting, and especially in PG County, there's so much new development. You're getting kind of pushed by the wayside a little bit when you're just an individual contractor. So we got the permits in place, took the roof off, and about 2 days after that, I noticed originally that the sill plate that runs along the front and back wall at the base of the foundation was rotten to the core. So originally we thought we were taking the roof off, and it turns out we were now taking down the front and the back wall and then having to put in brand new sill plate and then framing up again. Unfortunately, due to my inexperience at the time, the local inspector showed up, and we were permitted to replace the existing roof, but not to take down the front and back wall. I went to explain to this inspector, who really didn't want to hear what I was talking about, that you'd be okay with us putting a brand new roof on a rotten foundation, but you're going to shut down our work site because we're doing it correctly. And basically his answer was, yes, we are. Right. Anybody in flipping or renovations has experienced something of that sort, right? You're trying to do it right. You're trying to keep it within budget, and you're not permitted to do it, and you got to stop. So we ended up getting the stop work order placed on the project. And it was so ridiculous. The inspector actually wrote up a stop work order and said that we could not continue with the construction until all of the permits were in place. He made us, had nothing to do with the front and back wall, because at the time we were just doing framing. We were just doing structural. So we didn't have electrical in place. We didn't have mechanical in place. We didn't have plumbing in place. So here we are now, 6 weeks into a project, stop work order. And we now have to go out and sub out all of this work and get all the permits pulled before we can even start fixing the original problem. So that was my learning experience. It took us 9 months to flip this property. We were thinking,
did you lose money?
You know what? Fortunately. So I mentioned that a good friend of mine was my GC. Fortunately, he was my partner on the project. So the way we went into that deal was I was the purchaser on the property and he was the financier of the renovation. So thankfully, we were able to cut a lot of costs by doing it that way. I think at the end of the day, we sold the property. We listed it with a real estate agent, sold it retail for $275, and there was about $36,000 left by the time we finished. So we split about 15, 16 a piece.
You're lucky. You got lucky.
I got lucky. I did.
Some of these things take people out, man. I mean, I've opened up walls on things and,
yep,
found similar situations where you could literally grab 2x4s with your hand and dust, because you turn them into dust because of termite damage and things like that. And now you're replacing whole walls. And yeah, I mean, it's certainly flipping can be certainly a risky endeavor. Have you ever bought anything that was already ready, rent ready, and just turnkey? You ever done anything like that? Other than all your stuff been construction where you had to renovate?
Other than my personal residence, I haven't bought anything that was turnkey. No. Yeah.
So how about now today? What are you into? What kind of projects do you have going on?
So currently, the past 12 months, I've actually found that I don't mind flipping. Like, I would still do it, but you really got to know your numbers when you do that. And you got to have a great GC in place, because if you don't, you're going to be running to Home Depot and the lumber yard, and you're going to be grabbing paint. And, at the end of that flip we were just talking about, we were trying to save as much as we could. So I was running to pick up appliances. I was running to get roofing shingles just to speed up, the workflow, because if your contractor is running to the store getting materials, they're not at the house working. They're not active on the project. They're standing in line at Home Depot when you need them from 8 o'clock to 4 o'clock, banging it down. But so I kind of took it by the horns, as you would say, just because we had to speed it up, because we had 6 weeks of downtime when we had to, get all permits in place.
So you like the rental aspect better?
I haven't done much of it. Funny that you say, I've done a couple transactions in the last year where I was just the money. I wasn't even involved. I was the private money on 3 deals last year, where I was basically loaning the investor to purchase the property. Now, I wasn't the only. There were 3 of us involved, but this guy's paying 8% APR with a 1-year contract, and I basically go on the deed as first position. I look like a bank on the deed.
Mm-hmm. You encumber the property.
Mm-hmm.
Chris always say there's 3 types of real estate investors. So I've been helping investors, I guess, since I've been a licensee. So since I've had my real estate license, mm-hmm. and guys, everybody's quick. You get these investors and they start doing a deal or two, and then all of a sudden they want to run out and get their real estate license. And they think that's the way to go. I think it's actually better the other way. You're a real estate agent. You should become an investor. So you should, if you have a real estate license and you've been helping other people, you ought to practice what you preach and believe in real estate being permanence of investment and a good deal, a way to, make passive income or money on flips. And I think if you're an agent, you should be buying, real estate. But I don't think it's the other way around. I don't think if you're turning into a flipper or rehabber that you should get a real estate license. In fact, you're probably better off without it. And depending on what kind of investor you are. So let's talk about the three types of investors that I always say. You have your investor that's, we're going to put Chris in category 2. So category 1 would be the kind of investor that has a job or has a business and they have extra cash. They don't know, they want to diversify a little bit. They want to capitalize on real estate either through passive income rentals or flips. So what that person does is they basically look for a real estate agent who is, great with helping people invest. They know what to look for. They've done it themselves. And then what happens is they have to connect with a good GC or general contractor, is what GCs refer to. And that will basically give them a turn that they can trust that's done this kind of stuff, will give them a turnkey finished product or profit at the end of the day. Either the finished product to rent it or the finished product to flip it. And then it gets turned back over to that rock star investor specialist agent, right? To either fill it with tenants or property manager, fill it with tenants or sell it. That would be category 1 type of investor. Then you've got category 2 investor that I'm going to put Chris into. And that is one that likes the aspect of doing some things with the real estate, likes to learn, wants to learn as much as they can, doesn't mind going around and picking stuff up. But they also have a job where they get a check, they have income, but they want to go to the job sites, supply the contractors, keep a little bit more hands on the project, throw stuff in a dumpster, clean the site up, go to Home Depot, Lowe's, the supply houses, pick up stuff, right? And then, Chris, is that fair assessment? I mean, that's...
Yeah, I can't say I enjoyed it.
But that's what you did to get it done. You made time for it.
Yeah,
right? You made time for it. And then the third one would be what we would call the ballers. That's all they do full time. They invest in real estate. They go, you don't need to do anything. They can either through a wholesaler, through a agent, through a for sale by owner, whatever it is, they buy it. They do the whole thing themselves. Heck, even sometimes they sell it themselves. But you should really just kind of identify where you are and, where you want to be. But it's not what you see on HGTV. I love those shows where they're like, oh, yeah, I just did this amazing flip. I bought it for, $150,000. I put $16,742.68 in it and made $100,000. So, Chris, you like Baltimore, man. So let's just kind of dive in a little bit. And, I know you have some questions for me. Mm-hmm. We can kind of go over some things. And guys, and no matter how, if we're talking about Baltimore and understand where our proximity is, Chris is in D.C., I'm in the Baltimore metro area. I'm kind of like between. We have 2 office locations. We have one in Columbia, Maryland, which is in Howard County. We have one in Baltimore County. So we kind of cover a pretty large geographical area. In Maryland, we're not licensed in D.C., so I can't help you there. But so Chris, as an investor, you have any questions for me?
I do. So myself as an investor in Baltimore, I consider there's really 3 different types of real estate in Baltimore. You have the inner city down by the harbor, right? Down by the inner harbor, and then the east of the harbor. You also have the far west side, where I think a lot of people initially hear, oh, Baltimore, you can buy so cheap in Baltimore. You can buy a row home and renovate it. You can buy it for $10,000 and go up and renovate it and then flip it or rent it. And then you also have the real estate in the counties, right? And I guess to paint a picture for both of our viewers, there is a vast difference between those 3 different types of real estate in the Baltimore region. And my question to you is, a lot of my subscribers are new, not that savvy investors. And I've heard stories from different people. They contact the agent and they find a really, really distressed property. It's minimal cash investment of, let's say, $10,000. The property only needs $40,000 or $50,000 worth of renovation work. They get halfway into the project and the west side of Baltimore comes in and rips out plumbing, rips out electric, because you're now a active project and everything's exposed. What areas, and that's the drastic side of the west side that I'm referencing. You also have the, down by the harbor, beautiful new up and coming. You have Little Italy and Canton, and a lot of people are seeing great success investing there. And then you also have the counties, which are more the non-inner city brick row homes. These are single family homes that usually sit on a little bit of property. For the new investor, from your experience being a real estate agent, without suggesting to them an area, what are some of the more up and coming reasonable areas for an investor to start looking at?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. So, let's just kind of dissect that a little bit. So let's talk about one of the things that you said. And first of all, it's very exciting. You want to invest in real estate, whether you have a lot of money or you have no money. If you build the right team or really learn as much as you can find there are a lot of different ways to make it happen. Baltimore City, originally I was born in Baltimore City. My dad was a Baltimore City police officer. We moved out to the county. I grew up in a place called Reisterstown, which was straight up, Reisterstown Road. There's a lot of arteries that come out of the city in all directions. But and it's all served by the counties. The counties, a lot of them work downtown. A lot of people work downtown. But they're, to talk about somebody coming in and ripping out plumbing. I mean, I can remember, working downtown, doing projects and for investors and rehabbing them. And, but you can have materials and things stolen on job sites no matter where you are. It could be in Baltimore City. It could be anywhere in the county. It could be in your next door, in your next door neighbor, in your neighborhood. I think the key is that, when you are rehabbing and things like that, that you protect your materials as much as you can. So, you need to know, that if you're going to set the outside air conditioning units, you don't do it until it's sold or it's, you're ready to settle. So there are certain aspects. I mean, you want to try on any job site, you want to try and secure your site, secure your materials. I've built in the county and I had a lumber package where it was dropped off and I go up to, the job site and my 2x4s are half gone. And it's like, what the heck? And this is in, an affluent neighborhood that, you're like, wait a minute. And it's a newer neighborhood and the neighbors are using your studs to finish their basements because they didn't have it done by the builder. So you have to be careful. And I'm going to give you guys a couple of resources. So Baltimore depends on your strategies. So if you want to invest in Baltimore City or anywhere, you need to be familiar with the government websites, zoning, planning and review. And, I've always said to my investors and agents, in an area where you're looking to either work or invest, be familiar with what's going on around town, what's coming down the pike. And the number one place to do that is in zoning planning and reviews, because a lot of times when people are planning something, when companies are planning on doing something, they may not always disclose who they are, like Under Armour going to Port Covington, but years ahead of time, they're going to start with a planning process and a planning review process, and they're going to have public hearings and, planning review hearings that are leading up to, well, there's a 255 acre site, in Port Covington that an undisclosed buyer is looking to do XYZ, planning a master business community. So if you start at a zoning level and become very familiar with that, you're going to know where the pockets are that are up and coming. And everybody wants to do that. But I'm going to tell you guys something. These are things that can take years to develop. So if you're investing, if you're flip investing, or whether you're rental investing, you may be saying, hey, this something big's coming down the pike here in Port Covington, but the neighborhoods around it aren't seeing it yet, the growth. So you're going to have to wait. You're going to have to hope that it happens. You're going to have to wait for it to happen. The next thing would be once it's happening or once it's public, Then there's a jump in prices, just like the stock market, right? And then you have to realize if is that someplace that you want to be? But I want everybody to understand that there's opportunity at any time, at any price level, at any budget, depending on what it is you're willing to do for your money or your return. I remember when a previous mayor had a dollar house, you could go in, you could buy a house for $1, and then basically you fixed it up and you could rent it, or you could, whatever, flip it or what have you. But they were interested in putting tax maps back on I think the dollar housing, you had to keep it for a period of time. Maybe it was 12 months and rent it. But number one, you need to look at, what are you willing to do? And number two, what is it that you have in your pocket or that you have resources to invest? So I'm going to give you a couple websites to check out. Planning.baltimorecity.gov. Okay, that's a big website. They've got interactive maps on that site. They got neighborhood profiles. They have developments that are in progress right now. You can kind of see where the phases are. And the other one's zoning.baltimorecity.gov. And zoning is going to tell you things like, what can be done there. So, being familiar with, I always say when you're looking at real estate, you want highest and best use. So a lot of times when agents are marketing something or sellers are selling something, they're marketing it as residential, but it could actually be a commercial shop. It could be a storefront. So, you could better things like that. Colleges have always been a safe bet. So universities and colleges. So you've got some big colleges. There's a lot of development going around in the Maryland Institute College of Arts, which is the MICA. I mean, there's a lot of development that's going around there. We have a world-renowned college and hospital, Johns Hopkins, that brings people in from all over the world, literally. And those areas have a tendency to be developed. And then the other thing is, I'm going to give you another good one, is livebaltimore.com. That is a great interactive map that you can go on and you can actually select whether you want quiet living, entertainment living, that. So one is established, whether you want a turnkey investment or whether you want, a college, student as a tenant, or whether you want, a worker that is working at a major hospital, kind of determine that and sort of plan it around there. Walk scores, big importance. I think they've done a study, like 30% of the residents, I think, in Baltimore City, and I could be wrong on this, but I'm just trying to go by memory, but it's a pretty big percentage of people don't have automobiles. So, you want to make sure that if you want that walk score, that it's close to places, jobs, shopping, schools, things like that, hospitals. And Chris, so let me just kind of tell you some of the areas, that I like. So, and I'm not saying that I dislike any area, but I tell you the areas that I actively look myself, or kind of keep tabs on, is a place called Remington. So years ago, Hamden, was hot, right? Hamden, and you can tell trends. Neighborhood pricing, I guess, is really determined by, sort of like trends, people flocking to that area for whatever reason. And it might be jobs, it might be whatever, but the hotter the real estate is, the market speaks. So a lot of the value or the pricing is based on, and I always say, real estate's what somebody's willing to pay for it, right? The value it relies on what somebody's willing to pay. So years ago, I was involved in that whole from 97 to 2005, building like crazy, rehabbing like crazy. And then, 2005, the headlines, Baltimore Sun, overpriced Baltimore housing market, kind of slowed us down, shut us down. Then we had the crash of 2008, which everybody remembers. But we were doing a lot in Hamden, and Remington was just kind of coming up. And it was kind of like on the outskirts of Hamden, and people couldn't afford to be in Hamden, but they could afford to be in Remington, sort of what you're talking about, going outwards a little bit. And then when '08 happened, it just kind of shut it down and stopped because investors didn't have any money. They didn't know where the bottom was. So basically that area is picked back up again and, is really doing a lot of building development, a lot of neighborhood style, shopping and restaurants and bars and things like that. The other one's Upper Fells. You have like the harbor, you've got like, Little Italy is Greektown, and then you've got like Fells Point, and then you can go on to Canton. It's sort of like a line, down and around 83 South. But Upper Fells is really starting to come on too, because people like that Fells Point kind of lifestyle and living, but that's a little more affordable the further up you go. And then one that I'm really seeing come on really hot is Dundalk City. So, which is over by Broning Highway, where the GM plant used to be. Amazon built there, probably 5 years ago, something like that. They put a big, facility in. It really worked out way better. I think they were planning on employing like 1,000 employees. And I mean, it's just, I don't have to tell you, I mean, they've taken over that area. And I actually have properties myself off of Broning Highway, and currently we're doing some updating right now. We completely renovated them 10 years ago. And before Amazon came in, and I could tell you they've boosted us a lot.
Not moving away from Baltimore City, but you mentioned something to me the other day when we were talking about land investment, and it threw an antenna up, because I have other investors up and down the East Coast here in the U.S. that are heavily targeting land, right? And what they're doing is something similar you mentioned earlier in our conversation, is they go to these community meetings, these neighborhood commissions, these zoning hearings, and I'm sure they've mentioned it. It's boring as can be. You're going to be there for however long until your specific neighborhood comes up. But you're able to hear, whether it be from the city council or the zoning commission, you're able to hear what the plans are in place, right? From your experience, using, like, similar to what you said, using the Baltimore City website, are there, and I'm not asking you for specific areas, but is that probably one of the best ways to look for land in the Baltimore suburb region is studying what's going on, what the infrastructure or highways or maybe road expansion? Is that a good way of targeting investments there?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of that's kind of like few and far between. So when you're looking for road expansions and things like that, I mean, most of what you see on, that are traffic control devices like speed bumps. So you'll see 1,000 like proposed traffic control device on such and such a street. Well, they're speed bumps, or, a median strip. So commercial real estate really sets the tone for most of what goes on, right? The big money comes in, they set up the commercial infrastructure, shops, really jobs, because there's an economic factor that for every job that's created, it creates like 2.3 jobs, right? So what does that mean? So that means, and depending on the areas, it could mean up to 7 jobs, right? Based on one single hire, because people have to live in an area. They are, shopping, they're, getting dry cleaning done, they're hiring contractors, they're doing things. So then there's, what we call, like a 1, 3, or 5 minute drive time, or a 1, 3, or 5 mile drive time, right? And maybe it's not a drive time, maybe it's a walk score, depending on how micro it is. But what happens is you want to pay attention to what's happening on a commercial level. So when you see things being injected in the neighborhood, like, whoa, they just revitalized that shopping center, or they just brought in this Class A tenant, or they're building a new super Walmart, they're big things. Even if you're not going to the zoning hearings, they're big indicators that can tell you, hey, something's up. So if you're out driving around, the big thing is understanding when you're talking about traffic devices like median strips in the commercial real estate, it could be the kiss of death, because if you have a 4-lane road and they're putting a median strip in the middle and people have to do a U-turn to get to you, there's a going to work side of the street and there's a coming home side of the street in most neighborhoods All right. So if you're a coffee bagel shop and you're happen to be on the wrong side, the going home side of the street, but there's no median strip and there's a center turn lane, you still might survive because people can turn right into your parking lot and get there and get their bagel and coffee. If you are on the wrong side of the street and they put in a median strip, you're done. Because people aren't going up to a red light and then going all the way back around and going back around. It ain't happening. So, in commercial real estate, if you're investing in commercial real estate, you really need to know who's your tenant going to be before you buy that building and what side of the street is it on, things like that, exposure, traffic exposure, that type of thing. Chris, these community meetings, now they're done a lot differently because through COVID, they were done via Zoom. So you had to register like 24 hours ahead of time if you wanted to be a concerned citizen listening in on the hearing. But otherwise, when they're hearing these neighborhood impact meetings or what have you, they're a lot of times specifically for one neighborhood or one topic or one development plan. You don't have to sit there and listen to 10 different things that are going on until your neighborhood comes up. It's specific a lot of times. Yeah. So you'll see a sign posted, like a zoning hearing or a reclassification or whatever it is. They'll handwrite it. They have to post on it. And then, it becomes public record. It's on the county or city's websites. The city, by the way, Baltimore City has done a fantastic job with updating their web portals. So before it was disastrous, it was a nightmare, but they are one of the best now. Actually, Baltimore County is behind the times, but Baltimore City, you can go on, you can see active permits, you can see active development projects, and they're all up to date. And actually, Baltimore City is very efficient in permitting too. I mean, we have, I just put in for some deck permits on some apartments, and it was only a couple of days we had the permits and everything was done online. So Baltimore City really has come ahead light years.
Right. Yeah, I experienced that recently with a couple contractors. They said that this is during COVID last summer, it was taking the county 3 to 4 weeks to get permits, and it was taking the city 3 to 4 days. And they were just like, you do everything. Great. They were doing the permit from their phone at the job site.
Exactly right. Yeah. So it's from a investor standpoint, that's refreshing.
Yeah. Yeah. So I have one last question for you. As an investor, as a real estate agent with your own brokerage, I've been hearing from people all around the country about how the inner cities are seeing the flight of people out to the suburbs. And the reason being is people now, we're still in COVID right now. They want space, whether it be a single family home with a yard or anywhere where they have space, because we've been confined for over a year now, limited social interaction. Half of the restaurants are closed and might not reopen. And I know these businesses are suffering, but are you seeing that same influx that I've been hearing, people moving out of the inner city environment and looking for space?
We're not seeing it in Baltimore. Okay. We're really not seeing it in Baltimore. I mean, I've heard, I have friends of mine that are in New York and certainly California. Mm-hmm. It has some type of exodus happening, and people I hear are landing in Tennessee and Nashville and Texas, Dallas, Fort Worth, and are being, populated by Californians, but we're not seeing it in Baltimore. I mean, I think there's a couple things that are going on, Chris. One, I think people are very hopeful. They especially now they're seeing that with the vaccine, the restrictions are being removed slowly but surely. I think that they love downtown. So especially, when your buddies are downtown and, you want the action or you want to be close to work. I think work is a very important. People want to be close to where they work for many different reasons. So I don't think so. I don't see where, there's an exodus of the city in Baltimore. But what I do see is that there's nothing available to go anywhere. I mean, so we're seeing where there's a lack of housing or ready housing in the counties. So that might have a little bit to do with it too, because if you want that extra, land or whatever, you're, tired of city life and you want more of a rural life, there's just not anything available. But what we're seeing as a result of the pandemic is the transition of what is desired space. So what we've seen is where open floor plans aren't, they're kind of closing them up more and sectioning them off because they know that they're going to be working from home now more, or they're, afraid if there's another wave that they'll be schooling from home. So that open floor plan doesn't offer them the privacy that they need or the quiet that they need. I mean, they're really looking for that outside space, whether it's the rooftop deck or whether it's the fixed up narrow, if you're in the city yard, kind of maximizing that space and putting in privacy panels and things that they can enjoy it more.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard stories from around the country, but that's an interesting perspective. That in the DC market where I live, it's the same thing per se. People aren't moving out, but they're finding it very hard to find anything. And whatever hits the market, I've seen in my immediate neighborhood, everything's selling off market. Like they're getting multiple offers and they haven't even listed it yet. Agents are contacting each other saying, hey, I have a listing coming up. If you want to, if you have buyers, come take a look at it. And they're writing contracts like at the steps, basically. So
it's happening. It's crazy, man. We're seeing the removal of appraisal contingencies, people wanting to spend $25,000, $30,000 more than appraisal, which brings me to sort of like a final thought, Chris, because
sure.
I am a licensed agent, right? Broker.
Yeah.
I'd like to get your opinion on real estate agents. So, as an investor and, I know you've, kind of laid favor that you utilize agents as far as getting information and things like that. Yeah. And that you give the agent, if you buy something, you allow that listing agent to get both sides. But what's your opinion of our industry, the agents, and where do you think things are going?
So I don't know the true details, but I see the larger internet portals. Obviously, we all know Zillow is becoming a brokerage, and I don't know where that stands for the individual agent, but I think it's different in different markets. And the reason I say it's different in different markets is if I were looking for a house out in the country, down in the Shenandoah Valley of Virginia, and my friend Todd Sachs is my agent. Unfortunately, Todd Sachs can't help me with the Shenandoah Valley of Virginia. I would then have to go into that market to find someone that knows the area. They know the home values. As an investor, I would have to already be operating in that environment. So I think agents do provide a valuable service. From that perspective, is that you need someone that buys or assists people in buying and selling in each individual market. From an investor standpoint, I know that I don't actually need an agent to conduct real estate transactions. I need a title company, that can clear title for me, basically, right? But you mentioned recently that there was an article about there's basically right now in today's time, there's more active real estate agents than there are available properties. And obviously coming out of COVID, I'm hopeful that will obviously change at some point. But at the same time, most agents really don't do a lot of transactions. They might be licensed, but I know a couple guys, they're licensed, they'll pull a MLS, report for me, but they only do a couple transactions a year. And I think as an investor, there's a plus and a minus to a real estate agent. You're restricted to some point as to what you can tell me, what you can provide. As an investor, I could pretty much ask a seller any question, and I'm not obligated or bonded to any license or anything. But I think that I think real estate agents do play a valid part. Not that you all aren't needed all the time, but it is helpful. I mean, I could probably go pull comps. I could use, PropStream and all these different softwares. But I think an agent in a specific market is valuable because I would contact you about Baltimore County because that's where you actively work. You see this day in and day out. So why would I not reach out to an agent?
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. I think we're needed. I think we're needed now more than ever because the internet sites, are such a scary place to be. And if you don't, you're not going to get, it's garbage in, garbage out, and algorithms. And I've
Mhm.
seen, you mentioned Zillow. I've seen where Zillow, for instance, had a property at $599,000 as a Zestimate. I listed it at 680, and they changed it to 680 for no other reason than
Yeah,
I changed my, I listed the price. So,
yeah,
I think they are great portals for finding things. I mean, you're going to use my website to look for properties. No, you're going to use Zillow or Truly or something like that. But I think at the end of the day, it is good to get good, competent advice, since it is a big transaction. And an investor, if you know what you're doing, you can do it without us, sure. But also, if you found somebody that has a lot of experience with it. By the way, I could help you in the Shenandoah Valley. So I can't sell it myself, but I have a good friend that is there that's very competent. So, guys, if you're watching this, let me know where you're looking to buy or sell
yeah.
real estate. So, anyway, Chris Burch, man, this is awesome. This has been a great time.
Yeah,
Guys,
man.
we appreciate you, Chris. Thank you for being on the show.
Certainly, certainly. I appreciate you. And guys, look, we've said it throughout this whole conversation. Get good advice. Study your numbers. Reach out to someone like a Todd or someone in your local market. Any agent I've ever reached out to, they'll pull a list for you, whether you want comparables or actives or whatnot. And I do all sorts of other stuff. Some wholesaling and whatnot. But I use the advice of an active agent, all the time.
There you have it. So, guys, thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channels. All of our links are in the show notes. And until next week, thanks for watching. Sachs Realty, Maryland broker number 607720, office number 443-318-4514, equal housing opportunity.